My name is Laura. I am 35 years old and have been married for a decade to Michael, the love of my life. When we met, I was captivated by his charm and determination. He was a hard-working man, dedicated to his profession as a truck driver. Soon after we were engaged, we decided to take the big step and got married in an emotional ceremony, surrounded by family and friends. The first years of marriage were wonderful, even though Michael's work kept him away from home for long periods of time. I was in charge of keeping our home cozy, anxiously awaiting his return. Each time he returned, we celebrated our reunion with passion and love. However, as time went by, loneliness began to take its toll on me. The nights became endless, and the days became monotonous without his presence. I longed to have someone to share my joys, sorrows, and worries with. Sometimes I felt like my life was slipping through my fingers, while I clung to a love that was becoming more and more distant. One day, during one of his brief stays at home, Michael told me that he had invited his 3 best friends to stay with us while he was away. Charles, Diego, and Javier were like brothers to him, and he wanted me to get to know them better. At first, I thought it was a great idea, thinking it would be an opportunity to make new friends and fill the void I was feeling. But I never imagined how that decision would change my life forever. The day Michael's friends arrived, I was equal parts nervous and excited. I wanted to make a good impression and make them feel welcome in our home. Charles, Diego, and Javier were 3 attractive and charismatic men, each with a unique personality that captivated me from the first moment. That night, I decided to prepare a special dinner to entertain them. I took great care in every detail, from the choice of the menu to the decoration of the table. When we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was filled with laughter, anecdotes, and a warmth that I had not felt for a long time. I let myself be enveloped by their sympathy and attention, feeling appreciated and valued as a woman. As the evening progressed and the wine glasses were emptied, I noticed how their gazes rested on me with a special glow. It was a hidden but undeniable desire. I felt flattered, and at the same time, a spark of emotion ignited inside me. It had been so long since I had felt desired in that way. I tried to deflect those thoughts, reminding myself that I was married, and they were my husband's friends. However, a part of me longed to feel alive again, to experience the passion and adventure that seemed to have faded in my marriage. That night, I went to sleep with a mixture of guilt and excitement, unaware that I was about to cross a line that would change everything. The next morning, I got up early to prepare breakfast before the boys woke up. I wanted to surprise them with a feast of scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and freshly made toast. As I stood in the kitchen, humming a tune and lost in thought, I felt firm hands slide around my waist. Startled, I turned around and found myself face to face with Charles. His dark eyes were staring at me with intensity, and before I could react, he brought his lips to mine and kissed me passionately. For an instant, I froze, but then I let myself be carried away by the emotion of the moment. I tangled my fingers in his hair and kissed him back with the same intensity. We shed our clothes with urgency, leaving a trail from the kitchen to the dining room table. Charles lifted me up and sat me on the cool surface, kissing every inch of my skin. I surrendered myself to him without reservation, allowing his expert touch to bring me to an ecstasy I hadn't experienced in a long time. When it was all over, reality hit me hard. I had betrayed my husband. I had broken my marriage vows. Guilt washed over me, but at the same time, a part of me felt more alive than ever. I had awakened a fire inside me that I thought was extinguished, and now I didn't know how to put it out. We cleaned up the mess from our passionate encounter just in time before Diego and Javier came down for breakfast. I pretended normalcy, but inside, my mind and heart were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I knew I had crossed a line, but the temptation to feel wanted again was stronger than my sense of morality. After that first passionate encounter with Charles, I felt the need to escape the house and clear my thoughts. I decided to go for a walk in the nearby park, hoping that the fresh air and contact with nature would help me find some inner peace. As I wandered through the tree-lined paths, I bumped into Diego. Seeing him there, with his charming smile and warm gaze, made my heart race. We greeted each other and began chatting as if we were old friends. I found his presence comforting and at the same time exciting. As the conversation flowed, I discovered in Diego a sensitive, intelligent, and funny man. We shared our dreams, fears, and hopes, finding a special connection that went beyond physical attraction. It was as if we had known each other all our lives. At one point, Diego took my hand and looked into my eyes with intensity. He invited me to join him in his hotel room, promising me an unforgettable evening. I knew I was playing with fire, but the temptation was too strong. Almost without thinking, I accepted his proposal and we headed to the hotel. Arriving at his room, we let ourselves be carried away by unbridled passion. We kissed urgently as we shed our clothes. Diego gently laid me down on the bed and began to explore every corner of my body with his lips and expert hands. He made me feel adored, desired, and completely satisfied. We gave ourselves to each other without reservation, forgetting about the outside world and the consequences of our actions. At that moment, only the two of us existed, fused in a passionate embrace, letting ourselves be carried away by the pleasure and connection we had found. After our encounter, I was once again overcome with guilt. I had betrayed my husband again, this time with another of his best friends. I felt lost and confused, but at the same time, I could not deny the attraction I felt for these men. It was as if I had awakened a part of me that had been dormant for a long time. I returned home with my heart divided and my mind in turmoil. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, but a part of me longed to continue exploring those forbidden feelings. The temptation was too strong, and I was too weak to resist. That night, I was alone in my room, trying to fall asleep after the day's events. My mind was flooded with conflicting thoughts and mixed emotions. On the one hand, I felt a deep guilt for having betrayed my husband not once, but twice. But on the other hand, I could not deny the excitement and desire I had experienced in Charles and Diego's arms. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the door. I got out of bed, intrigued, and when I opened the door, I found Javier. He had a serious expression on his face, and I could notice some discomfort in his posture. He asked me if he could come in, as he wanted to talk to me about something important. Once inside the room, Javier began to apologize if his friends had disrespected me or made me feel uncomfortable in any way. He assured me that he would never dare cross that line, and that he valued my friendship and Michael's very much. His words touched me and made me feel even guiltier. I assured him that everything was fine and that he had nothing to worry about. However, as we talked, I could notice how her gaze drifted to my lips and how her breathing quickened slightly. Moved by an irrepressible impulse, I approached him and kissed him softly. Javier was surprised at first, but quickly reciprocated the kiss with the same tenderness. We let ourselves be carried away by the moment, exploring our bodies with delicacy and passion. Unlike the passionate and unbridled encounters with Charles and Diego, with Javier, it was a more intimate and emotional experience. We took our time discovering each other, kissing every inch of skin and whispering words of affection. We made love slowly, savoring every moment of pleasure. When we climaxed together, we stayed in each other's arms, enjoying the warmth of our intertwined bodies. However, reality soon hit us. Javier apologized for getting carried away and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that I had fallen into a spiral of deceit and betrayal. I had succumbed to temptation with my husband's 3 best friends. and now I didn't know how to get out of that emotional entanglement. I felt lost, confused, and racked with guilt. I knew I had to make a decision, but I feared the consequences of my actions. How could I look Michael in the eye after what I had done? How could I forgive myself for betraying our love and our marriage vows? I fell asleep in tears, begging to find a way out of the maze of emotions I had gotten myself into. After that night with Javier, my life became a whirlwind of emotions and lies. For the next month, I continued to see Charles, Diego, and Javier on the sly every time Michael went on a trip. It was as if I had developed an addiction to the excitement and pleasure those forbidden encounters gave me. Every time Michael left, I would make excuses to get away from home and meet up with one of them. Sometimes, it was an innocent coffee in a discreet place. Other times, we would end up entangled in hotel sheets, letting ourselves be carried away by unbridled passion. I lived in constant fear of being discovered, but at the same time, the adrenaline of leading a double life was intoxicating. I felt like an actress in my own movie, playing the role of a devoted wife in front of Michael and a passionate lover when he was with his friends. However, guilt and remorse were always present, lurking in the corners of my mind. Every time I returned home after a furtive encounter, I would look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman who looked back at me. What had I become? How had I gotten to this point? I tried to justify my actions, telling myself that it was because I felt lonely and neglected in my marriage, that I needed to feel wanted and valued. But deep down, I knew it was wrong, that I was betraying Michael's trust and jeopardizing everything we had built together. As the weeks passed, the emotional burden of leading a double life began to take its toll on me. I felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. I had to work harder and harder to keep up appearances and keep Michael from suspecting anything. I lived in constant fear that some detail would give me away, that a text message or a misplaced article of clothing would reveal my secret. Every time Michael looked into my eyes, I felt he could see right through me, that he could discover the truth hidden behind my forced smile. I knew I was playing with fire, and that at any moment everything could collapse like a house of cards. But in spite of that, I couldn't stop. It was as if I was trapped in a whirlwind of emotions and forbidden desires, unable to find a way out. Every night, I would lie next to Michael feeling like an imposter. I would kiss his lips, but my mind wandered to the memories of Charles, Diego, and Javier's passionate kisses. I made love with my husband, but my body longed for the expert caresses of those men. I lived in a constant internal struggle, debating between the love I felt for Michael and the passion I had discovered in the arms of others. I knew it was wrong, that I was destroying my marriage and my own integrity, but I could not find the strength to stop. This double life had become a prison from which I did not know how to escape. I felt trapped in a web of lies and deceit, dreading the moment when the truth would come out and everything would collapse around me. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, and that sooner or later I would have to face the consequences of my actions. But for the moment, I kept going, trying to keep my balance on that emotional tightrope, silently praying for a miracle to free me from that torment. One night, as I lay in bed with Charles, lost in the whirlwind of passion and pleasure, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. My heart stopped for a moment, and a shiver ran through my body. Michael had unexpectedly returned from his trip. With panic growing inside me, I tried to cover my nakedness with the sheets while Charles hurriedly got dressed, but it was too late. Michael burst into the room and found us in that compromising situation. My husband's face reflected a mixture of pain, anger, and betrayal. His eyes, once full of love, now looked at me with a coldness that chilled my blood. He shouted at Charles to leave immediately, and his voice trembling with pent-up rage, he demanded the truth. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I began to confess everything. I told him of the passionate encounters with Charles, Diego, and Javier, how I had succumbed to temptation and betrayed our love. I begged his forgiveness, trying to explain that I felt lonely and neglected, that I had sought in others what I could not find in our marriage. But Michael would not listen to excuses. He looked at me with a mixture of repulsion and pain, as if he did not recognize the woman in front of him. He told me that he could never forgive me for betraying him like that, much less with his best friends. I tried to approach him, begging him to give me a chance to make amends, to show him that I loved him and that I was sorry. But Michael roughly pushed me away, telling me that he could no longer trust me, that he had destroyed our marriage, and that he wanted nothing more to do with me. Heartbroken and guilt eating away at me, I watched as Michael packed his bags and left our home, leaving me alone with the weight of my mistakes. I collapsed on the floor, crying inconsolably, knowing that I had ruined the most precious thing I had in life. At that moment, the stark truth hit me hard. I had allowed my selfishness and weakness to lead me down a path of self-destruction. I had betrayed the man I loved and lost his trust and respect. Now, I had to face the consequences of my actions and try to rebuild my life from the ashes. After that fateful night when Michael discovered me with Charles, my life became absolute chaos. My husband left the house, taking with him not only his belongings, but also my heart and my dignity. I was left alone, plunged into a deep abyss of pain and regret. The days that followed were hell. Michael refused to answer my calls and messages, making it clear to me that he wanted nothing more to do with me. His friends, Charles, Diego, and Javier, also disappeared from my life, as if they had never existed. I felt abandoned, betrayed, and completely lost. I had to face the accusing looks and malicious comments from family and acquaintances. The news of my infidelity spread like wildfire, turning my life into a media circus. I felt judged, singled out and condemned by everyone, even by those who had once loved me. But worst of all was dealing with my own guilt and remorse. I couldn't sleep at night, tormented by the memories of what I had done. I would look in the mirror and not recognize the woman who looked back at me. I had betrayed my principles, my morals, and above all, the love of my life. I tried to seek solace in alcohol and pills, trying to numb the pain that consumed me inside, but nothing seemed to ease the burden on my shoulders. I felt lost, aimless, like a ship adrift on a raging sea. It was at that moment of total despair that I decided to seek professional help. I began to attend therapy, trying to understand the reasons behind my actions and find a way to forgive myself. It was a long and painful process, but little by little, I found the strength to face my demons and take responsibility for my mistakes. I also tried to reach out to Michael, not with the intention of getting him back, but to ask for forgiveness from my heart. I knew I had destroyed our marriage and did not deserve his forgiveness, but I needed to tell him how sorry I was for hurting and betraying him. To my surprise, Michael agreed to meet with me. In that conversation, I opened my heart to him and confessed everything I had learned in therapy. I told him about my insecurities, my loneliness, and how I had sought in others what I should have found in our love. I asked him for forgiveness 1,000 times, with tears in my eyes and my soul naked. Michael listened to me in silence, with a mixture of pain and compassion in his eyes. He told me that he appreciated my sincerity and that he understood that I was suffering too. But he also made it clear that it was over between us, that he could no longer trust me, and that he needed to move on with his life. Those words hurt me to the core of my being, but I knew they were just. I had betrayed our love and our marriage vows, and now I had to accept the consequences of my actions. Heartbroken but with a new understanding of myself, I accepted the divorce and set out to rebuild my life from scratch. Several years have passed since then, and although the road has not been easy, I have managed to find peace and forgiveness within myself, I have learned to value myself, to be honest with my feelings, and not to look for in others what I should find in myself. I have also realized that true love is based on trust, respect, and loyalty, and that no passing fling is worth sacrificing that. Now, looking back, I see that stage of my life as a painful but necessary lesson. I learned from my mistakes, grew as a person, and found the strength to move forward. And although I know I can never get back what I lost, I have learned to value what I have and to be happy with myself. This is my story, the story of how one bad decision can change everything. But it is also the story of how, even in the darkest of times, there is always hope and the possibility of a new beginning. I only hope that my experience can serve as a lesson for others, so that they don't make the same mistakes I made and value what really matters in life: true love based on honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect.